An unlikely friendship between a simple woman and a feudal lord began in the heart of a local marketplace. What they didn't know was that this encounter would forever change both of their destinies. France, 14th century. The town of Provins, famed for its fairs, bustled with peasants, merchants, and travelers. Among the buyers, Dame Manuelle walked with measured steps, clutching a small pouch of coins. With 4 children at home and little to spare, she had to choose carefully: a dark rye bread, a piece of hard cheese, and a bit of meat that might make a broth last for 2 days. Manuelle moved between the stalls, counting the few coins barely filling her palm. She needed bread, cheese, and meat for her children, but as she held out the money to the merchant, she realized it wasn't enough. He laughed, drawing the attention of nearby customers. "If you can't pay, don't waste my time." All eyes turned to her. Manuelle hesitated, her face burning with shame. With trembling hands, she began to return the meat, trying to keep at least the bread. The merchant smirked, satisfied to see her give in. In the crowd, a few chuckled, while others simply looked away. Before she could finish, a gloved hand placed coins on the counter. The metallic clink silenced the murmurs. The merchant looked up and saw a man in a dark cloak staring at him without expression. "It's paid," said a firm voice. Manuelle blinked in surprise. The merchant paused but took the money without protest. The man gathered the food and handed it to Manuelle. She held the bag tightly, confused. Who was this stranger? Before she could thank him, he was already walking away. People stepped aside to let him pass, casting curious glances. The merchant, who had just mocked her, now avoided eye contact. Something about that man had made him shrink. Manuelle clutched the food to her chest and hurried off, but the man's presence lingered in her mind. He walked a few paces ahead, keeping a steady pace, seemingly unaware or uninterested in the attention he drew. The merchant still watched from a distance, lips tight but dared not speak. The villagers murmured among themselves. Manuelle gathered her courage and approached. "Sir, thank you." He stopped, turned slowly, and looked at her. His eyes were marked by time, and the silence between them was heavy. "No one should be treated like that," he said bluntly. There was something in his posture that didn't match that of an ordinary traveler. He spoke like someone used to being heard, respected. A group of children ran between the stalls, laughing loudly. Manuelle felt a pang in her chest as she thought of her own children waiting at home. The knight noticed her unease. "Go! They need you." His words were simple, yet carried an authority she couldn't quite explain. Manuelle nodded and turned to leave, but after only a few steps, a question escaped her lips. "Who are you?" He turned partially, his voice calm and steady. "Edouard de Montreuil." The name fell heavily into the silence that followed. Manuelle recognized it from whispered rumors. He wasn't just another traveler. He was the Lord of Montreuil, with direct ties to the crown. A man of power, known among nobles and feared by those who mistreated the common folk. The name echoed in Manuelle's mind as she walked home. Montreuil. Why would a man like that wander through the market of Provins without an escort, blending in with the people like an ordinary traveler? Curiosity weighed heavier than caution. The next day, Manuelle returned to the market. It didn't take long to find him, seated on a stone bench near the central well. His posture was upright, his gaze distant, as if observing something beyond the muddy streets and stone houses. Manuelle took a deep breath and approached. "Why did you help me?" The question came out directly. He looked up, studying her for a moment before answering. "I didn't do it out of pity," said Edouard, his voice low but firm. "There are things one simply doesn't tolerate." Manuelle looked at him cautiously. "You speak like someone who doesn't accept the world as it is." He tilted his head slightly, never breaking eye contact. "Maybe because I've seen too much of it." She hesitated. "But "You're a nobleman." He let out a short, humorless laugh. "I am, but that doesn't mean I'm blind." Silence settled between them. Manuel had never heard a feudal lord speak that way. He didn't just seem different from other nobles, he seemed uncomfortable in his own position. Something in his story didn't quite fit. A bell rang in the distance, marking noon. Edward stood, adjusted his cloak and looked at her one last time. There is much that needs to change. Without further explanation, he turned and disappeared into the streets of Provins, leaving Manuel with more questions than answers. That night, by the fireplace, Dame Manuel's children slept, wrapped in the warmth of the embers. But she couldn't rest. The face of Lucien came to her mind, as vivid as the day he left. Her husband had left the village years earlier, carrying only a hammer, a few coins, and the hope of a better future. Lucien was a skilled blacksmith. He dreamed of forging weapons for great lords, of building something that would lift him from a simple life. When he heard about a merchant caravan heading to Burgundy, he saw an opportunity. He left with promises to return before winter. But winter came and went. Silence stretched into years. No letters, no news, only dark rumors that the caravan had been attacked in the forest of Fontainebleau. Manuel had heard the stories whispered in taverns. Bandits ambushed merchants, took everything of value, and vanished without a trace. Some said the bodies were never found. Others claimed the bandits burned the dead to leave no evidence. She never knew what to believe. Yet deep down, she always held on to a small hope that Lucien might still be alive. Edouard returned to Provins a few days later. Manuel found the courage to tell him her story. He listened silently, eyes fixed on her, as if analyzing every word. When she finished, he remained quiet for a moment. Then he crossed his arms and took a deep breath. What if Lucien is still alive? The question hung in the air, as if impossible to answer. Manuel's eyes widened. That can't be. But Edouard didn't seem convinced. There was a troubling doubt in his expression, something that didn't quite fit. He knew too many stories to believe only what was said. What if fate had other plans for Lucien? Edouard's words would not leave Manuel's mind. What if Lucien was alive? For years, she had clung to uncertainty, fearing both the truth and the illusion. But now, for the first time, someone willing to act shared that same doubt. And Edouard was not a man to accept unanswered mysteries. The next morning, he set out in search of an ally. Sir Louis de Saint-Denis was a name that carried weight. A former captain of the Royal Guard and an experienced tracker, he knew the forgotten paths of France better than anyone. When Edouard found him in a discreet tavern, Louis looked up from his mug of wine and let out a weary sigh. "It's been a while since anyone's asked me for something like this," he murmured, but the glint in his eye betrayed that the fire of his old life still burned. The investigation began in taverns, where survivors of attacks often spread their tales. Louis heard stories of lost caravans, ambushes at dusk, and merchants who were never seen again. In a village near Fontainebleau, he met an old man who swore he had seen wounded men being taken by a religious order. "Monks," he said with a trembling voice, "they gather and protect the dying, the forgotten." Louis followed the trail. He traveled to an isolated monastery, hidden among mist-covered hills. The place was quiet, its high walls and narrow windows guarding a peace that felt impenetrable. After introducing himself to the monks, he was led to the common hall, where he spoke with the prior, a man of slow speech and eyes that avoided unnecessary details. "He arrived here a few years ago," said the monk, referring to a servant, "who lived among them, rescued by chance by a group returning from the forest. He was badly wounded, feverish. He didn't remember his own name." Louis studied him carefully. "And where did he come from?" The monk hesitated. "From the northern edge of the forest of Fontainebleau. He was the only one found alive among the wreckage of a looted caravan." Later in the fields, Louis saw the man. He worked in silence, driving a hoe into the hard soil with precise movements. But it wasn't his strength that drew attention, it was the technique, his posture, the turn of his wrist, the rhythm of the strikes. Louis narrowed his eyes. That wasn't the way a farmer moved. It was the mark of an experienced blacksmith, someone who shaped metal as naturally as others shape words. He approached. "Have you ever worked with metal?" he asked casually. The man paused, wiped the sweat from his brow, and looked at him with a faint frown. "I don't know, but when I hold tools like this, it feels like my hands know what to do." "What's your name?" "I don't know," he replied. "The monks call me Frère Aimant, but I don't remember who I am or where I came from. My skill with tools and this birthmark are all I have from my past life." Sir Louis wasn't absolutely certain, but his seasoned instincts told him this man was Lucien. When he saw the crescent-shaped mark on his arm, he said, "I was sent here by a nobleman to find a blacksmith who disappeared years ago. Would you like to find out if that mark runs in your family? Come with me to Provins." Sir Louis wasted no time. He convinced the monks to allow Lucien to accompany him, claiming the man had a family waiting for him. But they had no idea what would happen when they reached their destination. The road back was long and quiet. Lucien watched the path, as if every step led through unfamiliar territory. In each village they passed, Louis noticed his companion's face tighten at the sight of strangers who seemed oddly familiar. His mind was still in ruins, like a battlefield scarred by time. When they reached Provins, they met with Edouard and Manuel. Her children hid behind her, peeking cautiously at the stranger. Lucien dismounted, his eyes scanning the surroundings as if trying to fit the pieces of a puzzle. His gaze settled on the woman before him, and for an instant a flicker of recognition passed through his expression. "Manuel." The word came out hesitantly, like an echo from far away. Manuel touched his face as if needing to feel, his skin to believe it. But Lucien was not yet whole. Fragments of memories emerged and vanished like morning mist. He remembered the smell of the forge, the warmth of home, but his own identity still eluded him. The children approached slowly, and he looked at them with eyes full of tears. Edouard watched the scene from a distance, but when Sir Louis mentioned something about the blacksmith, the night froze. "The mark on his arm, I wonder if it means something." Edouard frowned. "What mark?" Louis asked for permission and rolled up Lucien's sleeve, revealing the crescent-shaped birthmark. Something long buried was pulled from Edouard's memory, and suddenly he knew this mystery went far deeper than he had imagined. The silence that followed the revelation was heavy. Edouard kept his eyes fixed on Lucien, feeling a strange chill run down his spine. The crescent-shaped birthmark on his arm. He had seen it before, many years ago. He decided to act. He sought out an old servant who had once worked for his family, a woman who knew the buried secrets of the past. He found her in a nearby village, frail with age, but still lucid. When Edouard mentioned the mark on Lucien's arm, she went still. Her eyes, which had seen much, filled with something close to shock. "Isabeau," she whispered. The name carried weight. Isabeau. The woman Edouard had loved in his youth, but who had been torn from him by force. Fate had separated them, and nobility had stripped him of choice. She had vanished without a trace, sent away before he could defy his family. He never knew what became of her, never imagined she had carried his child. The old servant confirmed it. Isabeau had given birth in secret, far from the eyes of those who condemned her. She raised the child alone, protecting him as best she could. Time passed, and the boy grew up never knowing the truth. He became a man, a blacksmith. He became Lucien. And now, against all odds, Providence had brought him back to his father. Edouard had to sit down. The weight of the revelation crushed him. He looked at his hands, calloused from years of war and battles. Everything he had built, everything he had sacrificed, And there was the truth he had never been able to carry. His own blood, lost for so many years, now stood before him, unaware of who he truly was. Edouard returned to Provins, carrying an invisible weight. His steps were steady, but his mind wandered through memories long believed forgotten. Before him, Lucien had no idea of the truth. How could he tell a man that his entire life had been built on a secret? How could he repair a mistake that had spanned decades? He would need proof, something Lucien himself could not deny. He called Manuel for a private conversation. He revealed what he had discovered, the words leaving his mouth with difficulty. She listened in silence, her expression shifting between shock and disbelief. This can't be true. But something inside her made sense of it. There had been moments when she looked at Lucien and saw something she couldn't explain, something that at last had a name. Then Lucien walked in. The tension in the room made him frown. "What's going on?" Edouard took a deep breath. There was no gentle way to say it. "You're not just a blacksmith, Lucien." He hesitated, choosing his words. "You are my son." The silence that followed was sharp. Manuel watched Lucien, her eyes filled with tears. He, in turn, gave a nervous laugh, disbelieving. "That's absurd." But then Edouard mentioned the mark. "You were born with a crescent on your arm, just like your mother, just like—" He didn't need to finish. Lucien felt the ground vanish beneath his feet. The truth was too great to deny. Manuel held her breath. And Edouard, he simply waited. He knew no words could undo what time had destroyed, but perhaps there was still a path to rebuild what had been lost. Lucien stepped away, his chest tight with a storm of emotions. He had lived his whole life believing he was a simple man, a blacksmith, a husband, a father. Now he discovered he was the son of a feudal lord, heir to a lineage he had never known. The revelation was a heavy burden. He didn't need titles or land. All he needed was the home he had built with Manuel and their children. Edouard, however, did not give up. He saw something in Lucien beyond the anger and denial. He saw a leader, someone capable of changing the lives of villagers who had long lived on the margins. "I'm not asking you to stop being who you are," he said firmly, "but you have the chance to do something greater. You can protect your people. You can ensure that no one else goes through what your family endured." The words stayed with Lucien. In the days that followed, he observed the village with new eyes. He saw peasants struggling and paying heavy taxes, saw fear in the eyes of those who had little. He thought of his children and what their future might be. And then he realized his life had always been made of battles. Only now, perhaps, he held the right weapons to win. When he finally accepted the name that belonged to him, he refused to become just another distant, indifferent lord. He remained in Provins, but now as the protector of those lands. He brought change, challenged unjust laws, ensured that no one would go hungry again in the market square. His people respected him not for his blood, but for his actions. Edouard saw it all unfold. In the final years of his life, he stayed close to the son he never knew he had. And in his last days, he departed with the certainty that at last, a mistake from the past had been made right. What did you think of this story? Do you believe that Lucien and Manuel honored the Montreuil name after Edouard was gone? And what about Edouard's strength and resolve? What did that mean to you? Leave your comment and thank you for watching. See you next time.